Now we're ready to actually tie the reed on. Before you do that, it's very important that you soak your cane, but even more important that you don't over soak your cane. We recommend hot water for about 10 minutes to soak the cane. After that, you're going to want to tie your string to a C-clamp. It doesn't matter what kind of knot, just tie it so that you can pull against it and it doesn't come undone. Then you're going to wax your thread a few times up and down. This helps your thread grab to your reed and helps with the seal of your reed to the staple. So now if you'll get your staple and affix your staple, very, very important that your staple actually fits your mandrel and goes to the end of your mandrel. You don't want your staple to come down your mandrel, but even worse, you don't want your staple to stick up beyond your mandrel because it will actually crush with the torque of your thread, and that destroys the whole board that happens starting in your reed going all the way through your oboe. Dry it off a little, your piece of cane, and you're going to fold it over the end of your tube. And you're going to need to measure from the bottom of your staple all the way to the very tip of the folded part of your cane. And that, there can be a range between 71 and 73. I think we pretty standard for your shape are at 72, aren't we?
Yeah, and I mean, each piece of cane is shaped on a particular template. It's helpful if you know what that is. When you buy cane shaped, it's good to ask them what shape is it, because there's some pretty concrete guidelines about how long to tie the reed based on the shape.
And your teacher may have a very specific shape that they like you to use along with the length that they like you to tie. So once you find the exact spot where this should be, you're going to want to put a pencil mark to show where the staple ends. Put that pencil mark on your cane.
Yeah, so just a little line so that I can always see that as a reference point where that top string should end up.
Yeah. You're going to put a couple wraps around your reed.
Right, and I'm doing this down below the end of the staple.
And give it a little bit of pressure, but not much at this point.
Right, so if I were to, I'm not pulling so hard that that's a really high-pitched sound. I'm just
enough so it's not wiggling around.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm definitely not pulling full force at all.
Go ahead.
And here comes the fun part.
Yeah.
The offset, or the slip, or the overlap, however we want to call it. So essentially, if we're tying right-handed, it means that the torque of the string is going that way. And what we want is to offset the blades towards us in the opposite direction of the torque, essentially. So let's say these are the blades of the reed. I'm going to offset just like that so that it creates this lock and key effect on both sides.
Right. So when she's wrapping away from her, this is pushing this blade and locking it into the bottom blade because there is a slight curvature.
We can't make that point important enough, actually. Right. The offset must be in the opposite direction of the torque of the tying. So basically the flat part of the cane is corresponding to the flat of your mandrel. Important that your mandrel has a flat side. That corresponds to the big part of the oval of the staple. Our method is to line the cane up with the flat of the mandrel. And if you were looking at the hands of a clock and imagine 15 minutes after, 15 minutes till, I want my piece of cane to represent 1 minute past that. So 16 minutes after. So it's kind of like if you picture an airplane who just goes like that. So I'm actually going to use my fingers to kind of move the cane a little bit. So now I see it's just tilted 1 minute past that. That will set your overlap. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to change the relationship of blade. Not at all. It will happen on its own. So from here, I'm going to roll towards me 2 times and check. And what's important to realize now is that this will not be closed on the side because I'm way down below the staple. But what is important still already at this stage, the amount of opening that I see on both sides is the same. That way I know I've got symmetry established immediately. And I'm just going to roll towards me. I'm rolling. And as I roll, the gap is getting smaller. as I get closer to my pencil mark, I'm pulling a little harder. And I'm going to keep rolling until it looks like I'm about 2 ties below the pencil mark. And I'm going to check everything out again, make sure things are straight, make sure the opening is the same on both sides. And at this point, it is almost closed already. And this is where I pull.
Right.
So 2 ties below that pencil mark. Now I pull.
And that
you hear
just
that.
seals it all up.
And it's not only that we're pulling on this side, this hand is also has a lot of torque. And now I've got these 2 ties to the pencil mark, which I do overhanded. From this point now, I don't want the thread to go up the reed anymore. I need to cover this part. So we do what is called the crossover of the string. And now I go this way, essentially wrapping this part of the thread under the others.
Just pulling it down through.
And important here also, let's just mention, I'm pulling all the time.
Right, she's keeping the torque pretty tight through the whole rest of the wrap down the reed. And she's going to continue that all the way down. We don't find it necessary to shave the end of the cane, this part. We feel that it helps the stability of the reed, and so some people like to shave that so that it looks neater for the thread to go down the staple. It's okay.
Who cares?
That it has a little bump off there,
right?
Because in the end it's helping your reed. Now she's going to wrap down until she's maybe about 2 to 3 wraps from the top of the cork. And then she's going to make knots to secure the thread in place.
So my particular method is now to get rid of this part. I don't need to be attached to the C-clamp anymore, so I found a way to hold everything. I'm still pulling, by the way. You never stop pulling once you are in this stage of tying. I'm just going to clip that away. And now it's just the spool and the reed. Most people who I know who make reeds do the same knot. I think of it as a peace sign. And I go around the peace sign, orbit the peace sign, and go up through it.
Slip knot.
Yep. The reason we leave some space down there is that you don't want to be knotting on top of thread. You want to be putting your knots on the staple. That was 3 knots, and I'm going to really squish it down in there. Very important that after you tie it, you inspect it.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my overlap or offsetting of the blades is exactly correct on both sides. I want to make sure that there's no gaps here at the thread so that it doesn't leak, and I check it for suction, and it is sealing. I measure it one more time just to make sure that I've really represented the length of the staple with the top thread.
Right.
Because if it's wrong, you have a very narrow window of time to kind of take it apart and tie it again really fast.
Right. This initial building of the reed is so crucial because there's already enough things that can make an oboe reed go wrong. So these things that are very succinct and measurable, literally, are extremely important to the success of the next steps.
Right. Once I determine that it's a keeper, the very next thing that must happen is that we remove this little excess bit of cane right here. We call these ears. You may end up receiving cane in the mail that has those
already
removed. Yeah, already gone. But these are here, so I'm going to remove those. It's kind of like peeling a potato. Now the reason it's so important to get that off of there is so that the reed closes all the way to the top. So there's our reed. It looks very similar to the ones I showed you before, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. Ready for scraping.
Looks like you did a great job.